Hi, I'm Cori Murray, Deputy Editor at Essence Magazine, and I am excited to be a part of the Macro Lodge at Sundance Film Festival. And we're going to be talking to the writer and director of the film, Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul, Adamma Ibu, producer Adanne Ibu, and the film stars Regina Hall and Sterling K. Brown. Let's bring them in. Hi, everyone.
Hey.
Hello.
What's up?
Nothing much. Oh, I should have started by saying amen or amen.
Amen. Yeah, that's what the people on the internet are saying.
Amen. I want to start by talking to the writer, directors, and creators, which are the Ibu sisters, Adamma and Adanne. Where did you guys get the gem for this story?
I mean, we were raised Southern Baptists, went to mega churches all our lives, all we can remember, and are from Atlanta, Georgia. And so like that culture is definitely just within us. And I would say the essence of the idea came from us really starting to question the power structures that were in play in these institutions, and really just wanting to like make people also question, and call on people to,
think critically.
Yeah.
Now, it started out as a short, right? When did you know that it could be bigger?
I wrote the feature before I wrote the short, actually. So
kind of a different version.
It was a different version of it. There was always Trinity and Lee Curtis at the center, but it had a different name and everything. It was an equally long name though. So I knew that I was going to make this short while I was in film school, but I took like this feature writing class at UCLA and decided to make a short film version of it as sort of like a proof of concept of what could be a feature.
Wow. Now, when did the stars align for you to get Regina Hall and Sterling K. Brown? I mean, these are some pretty in-demand actors.
That was God.
Yeah, that was
sure
God.
That got
some holy water. Some holy water.
I think well, when we first met Daniel Kaluuya and Ron Riley, Amanda Critchlow of 59%, they asked us first who we saw as Trinity, and I think you said like a Regina Hall type, because we didn't think that we were
we're not gonna get Regina Hall. So I was like somebody very similar if that exists. But Rowan was like, oh, I'm like friendly with her agent. We'll send her the script and see if he likes it for her. And then eventually we met, and it was just instantaneous. We were like, yeah, this is it.
This is it. Yeah. And I think for Sterling, our search for Lee Curtis took a little bit longer, and I don't quite remember when Sterling's name came up, but I think Adam and I, our first instinct was like, wait, is he funny? Because we're used to him in like This Is Us, Waves, like all,
making us feel the things.
OJ, like making us feel the things, making us cry. And so we were scrolling through his credits, and we saw that he guest starred on an episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And so we turned on the episode, and we were dying. He plays like a murderous dentist, and first of all, our father's a dentist, so we were like, "This is
oh my God,
this is very smart." But he plays very much the straight man in it, but he's so funny.
Yeah, and so I think after that we were like, "Oh no, this is gonna work," and then we hopped on a call with him, and we were like, "This is it. This is perfect." And then getting the two of them on the Zoom, we were like, this is Trinity and Lee Curtis.
What do we have to do to make this
work?
What
do we have to do to make this happen?
Yeah.
Now, to Regina, I mean, you're just coming off 9 Perfect Strangers, which I love, and you're in demand. Sterling K. Brown, multiple award-winning actor on the season finale of This Is Us. I mean, you guys are busy. So what made you stop everything and jump on board an independent project?
I mean, I like a good project, whether it's independent or studio. It's just really all about when you read a script and how you respond. And I just thought, Adamma wrote it was so smart and funny and witty, and provocative and thought-provoking. And to get that, and there's a message without it being preachy, and it just was really thought-provoking. So when I read it, and then I watched the short, and I was like, oh, so she directs funny too. And then I'm like, wait, they're twins. What is going on? So then I met both of them, and they were just smart, like talented, creative Black women who, are forces. And it's exciting to be able to work and create alongside someone who, like, you see, it's just so bright. So, I was actually honored that they thought of me. And when I read the script, I was like, it was a no-brainer. So it was a matter of, we just all figured out when it would work.
Yeah.
And then when Sterling came, was and fitting those pieces together. And and Adamma was great. She was like, you know what, it's cool, I'm gonna be working on the script. She was over there every draft got better, and we were like, what is happening? What is happening? And then once Sterling and my brother was on that Zoom too, but Sterling and I connected. It was just, I don't know, it was like, oh, it felt, I don't know if you can feel the energy of something special. It felt like that.
Yeah, I echo everything that Regina just said. I also say, like, there's this interesting sort of evolution of self for me with regards to relationship and religion with God. Um, and what's the more important of the two? And I come down on the side of relationship. My wife and I having two young children, whatnot, and wanting to raise them with a sense of spirituality, but also wanting to raise them with what we were raised with, which was the church, like the church, but not wanting it to be sort of there's baggage with the church too, in terms of homophobia and in terms of like seeing things in very narrow ways. And we're like, how can we give them the church and not give them that other stuff? And I feel like this movie is sort of asking that question in its own very specific way as well. So, I mean, the content draws you in immediately. If you all haven't seen the short that the film was sort of the launch point for, the short is hilarious, right? And I remember talking to Regina. I was like, yo, we about to crack them up. And then the script comes in, and I was like, this is funny and
it's both.
Some other shit's happening as well. Please excuse my French. But like stuff that is very incisive and very sort of thought-provoking, like Regina said, about this institution, the good that it is, and the not so good that it can be as well. Yeah.
Sterling, I'm glad you brought that up because Adamma and Adanne. So while Honk for Jesus has several moments of satire, but it is rooted in very serious allegations of sexual abuse, abuse of power. And how did you balance not making light of that? Because, I also raised Southern Baptist, we are taught to forgive and forget, you know. They're just, what is the Donnie McClurkin? I'm a saint, but not a sinner. We fall down, but we get up, How did you make sure that there was going to be balanced just right?
I mean, I think it's because of my own personal relationship with the church, which is that, like, I love it for what it is, and I critique it for the things that I think that it could be doing better. And so I think you just like follow that natural line of it, like being engaging and funny and relatable until it's not. And when it's not, you just be absolutely real about it.
Yeah.
And to me, that it just felt very natural to let that sort of flow into each other.
Yeah, I also think that we never make fun of what the allegation is.
Yeah.
I think the comedic moments are with, the bombastic nature of these characters and the church and stuff like that. But that's where we let the comedy live. Whereas when we get closer to what the scandal actually is, we let that breathe and be real.
Yeah.
We're not poking fun at that at all.
Or making light of it.
At all.
I also want to say too, in terms of like my engagement on it as well, like it was important to me that the young men were of a particular age where consent was possible, because it becomes something different. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is the actual conversation we were interested in having, because I think people are used to talking about religion and abuse in a certain context.
Mm-hmm.
But what they're not used to talking about is the nuances in between that. When it doesn't come, presented to you cut and dry, this is bad, this is evil.
Yeah.
What this person is doing is evil. Then how do we talk about abuse of power in that context?
Yeah. So Regina and Sterling, both of your characters function as a unit as they're both committed to restoring their place in the church and I guess Southern society or Atlanta society. Even though Trinity has reservations and Lee Curtis stifles his desires, his true desires. Can you talk about developing that dynamic on screen for your characters?
What you got, a little bit?
I don't know. I think working with Sterling is that's one of the great things is talking and I feel like the one thing that I will say that we had that was great was rehearsal.
Yeah.
It was really wonderful to be able to sit in a room and read it and hear it and rehearse it and, sit with the director, the producer, and kind of feel like we got to discover it and we got to discover Trinity and Lee Curtis together. Then with what we had, that we were, kind of still trying to feel out because they are, they are opposites, and it's like Lee Curtis is a big dynamic presence, and and I think Trinity is, for Trinity, I feel like she is, she's entranced by that because the parts of them that work beautifully. It's just for a marriage, the parts of them, that part, that as a woman you want so badly. But my goodness, I do also get a lot. But then it's also connected to my commitment to God. That marriage is very connected to Trinity's commitment. That covenant that you make in marriage, where it's the three people. So I think just discovering and playing with Sterling, that was and Sterling gives you so much, you know what I mean? So and he's so he's flattering Trinity. He said, "What did you say, baby? What was I?"
With the beautiful wife and the Bugatti, I am. It is, it's funny. Like there'd be scenes where we were doing, whether it was roadside preaching or we were trying on our clothes in the closet, what have you. And you really do get that sense that these people enjoy one another in a sincere way. Like their relationship may be almost more fraternal than it is romantic, because if there wasn't the issue of romance, they'd probably be peas in a pod. But this woman dedicated her life, sickness and health, rich or poor, till death you part. And he has a tough time being intimate with his wife, right? And now, let me sexually, I think he actually shares as much of himself that he can with her. And I say that in terms of my use of the word intimate. Like, I think she is the most intimate person in his life. And I think that maybe, and don't let me put words in your mouth a little bit, so speak back, one of the reasons why she makes a decision to stick it out is because while he may have proclivities and desires for other things, like he's still his friend, his partner. No one is a better partner for him than Trent, and so we would play with things, and Adamma would do wonderful things where we would do scenes with a wild variety of tone, right? And so like read it on the page, you're like, okay, I kind of got a beat on this joint. We're gonna do it like this, and we would do it like that. And she's like, now, Negro, I want you to do it.
Here comes old curveball Adamma coming in to make you read, and you'd be like, okay.
Right? And I was like, I didn't think about that. And she's like, yeah, now turn yourself back and do it like that. And she just kept doing that through the process, which was a delightful challenge as a performer, right? It was exhausting and exhilarating simultaneously. So I would say we had faith in it because every time she said something, we'd be like, ooh, that would be fun. Let's see.
That was what was great too, to think, to hear and be like, wait a minute. Okay, let me see. Let's try that, because that's a different point of view. And then you see that in the choices that it gives, it gives her in an editing room, and you're like, oh, yeah. And sometimes I'd be like, oh yeah, that's better than what I thought.
Yeah.
That's what, you'd be fun. Now, again, like he said, you might be exhausted and wonder how you'll survive again tomorrow. But But what I also will say is she comes with such love,
Yeah, man.
support that you never feel abused.
Amen.
You know, it never feels abusive.
Well, it makes me think, okay, well, two questions now I want to know is, Sterling, how much are you Lee Curtis? Because there were you were acting a real fool. And wait, I'm getting hot. I gotta put
Did
my
you see his dances?
yes, dances.
Okay. I think
The sling back of the jackets.
Listen, I mean, everybody approaches things slightly differently. I feel like acting for me is controlled schizophrenia, where you have like all these people sort of living inside of you, and each character, each project asks you to access a different aspect of self. So everything is me. So the fool that is Lee Curtis lives inside of Sterling quite naturally. I just have to pick my spots when I let this knee grow out. So this one was acceptable. This was a time in which it was acceptable.
I will say there was a moment. It was one of the sermon scenes where Sterling was giving his sermon, and I call cut, and I go up to him to like chat a little bit about it, and then he goes, "I like being up here." I like this stage.
Sterling was very comfortable with that megaphone. I will say that. Very comfortable.
Oh, you mean this megaphone?
Oh, look at you.
I've been fighting my daughter for it. Well, Adamma and Adanne, tell me, you guys are twin sisters. This is your project. I mean, Sterling and Regina were great partners on screen, but how are you all behind the scenes? I mean, clearly you must be good.
I'm gonna answer first.
Okay.
I'm gonna answer first, and then they can answer. They are two people, one person, individual, completely connected, like finish each other's sentences, but more importantly, there's a safety they feel when the other is near, and so they just provide this space of support and love. They're like, it's beautiful to watch.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were born a partnership, right? And I think we describe each other as soulmates, because we really feel like there's just the interconnectedness is unparalleled. It's really having someone who knows what you're thinking, knows what you're feeling, who like things can go unsaid, but that clear communication is still there.
Yeah.
And that just translated to being on set. We were just
being creative partners.
Yeah.
It came very, I know like a lot of people are like, I could never work with my family. And I think that we found that we're quite better together.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, which one of you can explain praise miming to me? Because I thought it was a joke.
So many people do. It's
Yeah.
a real thing.
It's real.
It's a real thing. I'm not it got really popular when we were like in high school or something like that. And I was just like, why are we doing this?
I feel like the church saw the Jabberwockies and were like, yo, we could do that.
Yeah, I don't know if we can actually explain it. We were in shock and awe of it when we first saw it. We were like, oh, this is real. Like we went to Spelman College, and a big thing at HBCUs are pageants.
Yeah.
Yes.
And people would do praise miming as their talent, as the talent portion of the pageant.
Yeah.
And it's a serious thing. It's a serious part of praise and worship, but for some reason it was always just
a little eerie to us.
Yeah, it put us a little off kilter always.
Because I love gospel music, and so
Yeah.
anything that involves gospel music, I'm all in. But like the praise miming, I was like, what are we doing? What are we saying?
Why?
And so it's literally that. It's just praise dancing to gospel music, but with mime movements and makeup.
It's real. YouTube it. It's
Yeah,
real.
it's
There's
so
tons
real.
of
I wish and hope to see that with an audience, because when you go to Regina's face, just deadpan, and old girl hits it, and never could have made. I pee on myself just for a little bit every time. It's fantastic.
That's good. Another moment I love though is when Trinity, Regina, is coaching Lee Curtis on his Easter service speech. And she's empowered to be critical of his delivery, but she doesn't push back on any of his transgressions. Regina, why do you think that is? Like, why was she beginning to face the cracks in her marriage in that moment?
Well, I think, when you watch the film, it's really coming off of a pretty emotional attack that she had just received from a woman and her daughter. And I think she realizes if you do not have authenticity beyond I'm not perfect, that won't be enough. And she, I think, really understands what they are up against. Like, this isn't going to be fixed with a powerful sermon. And I think Lee Curtis is such a master, and he's always been able to do that. He's a wordsmith. He's incredibly emotional and charismatic, and he has come to rely on that. And she knows it will be more. It will take more. And I think the truth is, when you look at the film, Lee Curtis and Trinity, they're in it together. I mean, this is the two of them. This affects their lifestyle, their church. And Trinity feels like this is as much hers as it is his. And so as the voice, she has to tell that voice, he must be honest. But she recognizes submission too, and certain lines that are important.
Do you think, Regina, and this for everybody, like, there's things that they may have discussed prior to the beginning of the film? They're like, all right, we are resolved in this thing, right, that's transpired, and may have talked it through more than you've seen it spoken in the film. Like, it's hinted at when she comes and at the basketball scene.
Yeah.
She's like, what are you doing? Did you promise him anything? Like,
I think they definitely talked about it. But I think men are different, because I think men go, we talked about that and it's done. It doesn't end. It doesn't end for women.
It doesn't. Oh, that's what's.
It doesn't.
No, even when we talk about it, it can come back up emotionally. It doesn't. Yeah. It's not gone. It's addressed. It's acknowledged. It's accepted. But it doesn't mean that it's done.
Yeah.
So
that is true. So, Adamma, in your director's statement, you write, despite how critical I am of the church, there is still so much about it that I love and find beneficial and beautiful. What are those beautiful things that come to light in the film?
Well, I think it's, I would say primarily it is like the connection that people have with it. Definitely the Devout Five are ride or dies, like they're here to stay. But I think it's shown the most with the Montarius West scene. And, he's genuinely telling Lee Curtis, like, you've saved my life in so many ways. Like, I believe in something because of you. I'm a better person because of you. And people, so many people, including myself, have found that within the church or within aspects of the church. And I think that's invaluable. Like, I think that's gorgeous. And, I think that's the best of what this institution has to offer is that safe haven, is that emotional safety for a lot of people, and spiritual safety.
We also wanted to show the possibility of change, of evolution, and that's kind of what the Sumters represent.
Oh my God, the Sumters are brilliant.
Sumters are trifling.
Nicole Bahari and Confidence, they killed it. They were literally a mini Trinity and Lee Curtis, but 2.0. Like they really bought it.
She really. I didn't like her.
Oh, here's the thing.
That was clear.
You understand? They weren't in. They were a later development from the first scripts that we read.
Yeah.
And brilliantly, they were incorporated in to where you got a chance to critique an institution and a culture, and not just two people, right? And Regina and I both, like, when I first read them, I was like, I hate these people.
They are coming for your necks.
They were coming. under the guise of Christianity and love.
Yeah.
They
Flying
will
guillotine.
be there to catch everybody. Oh, but yeah, they were amazing, so wonderful.
Well, Sterling, what were some of the more beautiful moments for you in the film, in the context of the director's statement?
Let's see. I think that there's something for me, having come from a family with many people who are LGBTQ, who are also Christian, and like finding their way in, and where are they accepted fully and wholly as themselves. And you were made reference to something earlier before, like love the sinner but hate the sin.
Yeah.
And I often question that as a critique as a young person. I was like, well, to the individual, how can they tell the difference? Like, how can they tell the difference what's being directed towards them? And there can be this veil of acceptance, but I'm a pray for you, that sort of keeps you from fully being in acceptance with an individual, right? And so for me, Lee Curtis was sort of this wonderful character study of like someone who forces themselves to fit within a box that may not be organically right for them.
Mm.
But then the idea of having to question that box means his whole world sort of unravels in a way in which he doesn't know how to put it back together again. And so there is, from the outside, in one particular lens, you could see him as just being like an awful person. That wasn't the lens through which I sort of attacked him. My lens was like, oh, we don't get to pick how the devil torments you. You know, like that was the line that sort of just goes like, oh, shit, this is his cross to bear, and how is he going to bear it in a way that allows him to move forward in life? And so I just think the whole character was of extreme interest to me, because I know people who, for either a period of time in their lives or still, deny themselves of full expression because they don't feel as if it is acceptable. And I think that's a wonderful thing to sort of see someone try to figure out.
And Regina, how about for you? What was a beautiful moment of this film?
I think I just loved all the moments when the characters were vulnerable. You know, I loved any moments like that. I loved the moment when Lee Curtis is approached by Khalil on the street. You know what I mean? And you know that I tried. You know what I mean? I love any moments that have. I love that because Khalil stood up for himself. You know, I love that Lee Curtis. I mean, the truth is, he says you're perfect. I mean, it's like it's so genuine, it slips, you know. So I love whenever when all those really beautiful moments where you feel like so much is dropped in, you know. Many beautiful moments, but I just love the moments where you feel that.
I also just want to say, like, to not keep it heavy, I love the pettiness. Like,
Yeah.
the pettiness gives me great joy. Like amen versus amen is the dumbest thing to get in a fight about, but it's real.
It's real, yeah.
But amen does.
It sounds like, you know, amen.
You're a leader and you're on the internet following, but we got to keep it here. That's why it's amen.
And the hat jabs.
The hat jab. You know.
And wait, are hats that expensive?
Yeah, they run pretty expensive.
Yeah.
It's so expensive that it was a little tough to get the amount that we needed for the production design. Mm-hmm. A lot of them actually came from our late grandmother's closet, which was extremely helpful and you know, moved me in a lot of ways. But we had to fill that hat store up a little more, and they were running up the tab.
There are entire boutiques dedicated to church hats.
Oh wow,
I'm serious.
Well, Bathsheba's Bonnets was one of my favorite names. I mean, yeah, I'm not getting over it. Getting that name alone.
So I have to end our conversation with one very important question. How much of Nuck If You Buck did you already know before you filmed that scene?
I hate to say I didn't know any. I really didn't. And I was like, and I was like, what are you doing? One day I was like, Sterling, I was like, we got to actually do. He's like, we got to rhyme the song. I was like,
you got to say it with feeling.
Yeah.
It was important. That was important.
I was talking to Adamma and Adanne. I was like, so, yo, when y'all gonna give us this song? Because I knew it was coming up in the production. I was like, they ain't gave us a song yet. And so I'm just like trying to look at Outkast, trying to look at T.I., look at whatever Atlanta, like I knew from my time, recognizing now that I have a different time. And they're like, no, we're gonna do Nuck If You Buck, you know it? And they looked at us like, y'all know that one, right?
Yeah.
And we were like,
the international sensation Nuck If You Buck.
There's a whole podcast dedicated to the history and prominence of that song. Yes.
Yeah.
wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Well, we need to go on it now.
Yes.
That's true. We need
to go on it now.
Let's keep moving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, but we and Regina would get together. I was like, you worked on it? She's like, yeah, I'm starting to get my part. And then we would just sort of like do it over and over and over and over again. And then the night of doing it was fun. But then one time Regina was like, can we just do it one time with like the song playing in the background and like instead of like in our earwigs and we were hyped. We got hyped.
Yeah.
It was very fun. It was to the point though, like when we would call cut and in between takes, they would go on to the next verse. And I'm like, oh, they in it. They are in it.
Because you have to let that camera roll.
Yeah, we were waiting for it too. We had gotten to the point where we were like, it's tonight, we about to do nothing. I don't know how and like on set they were like, y'all ready? You know what I mean? Like
the whole crew was like, y'all about to do nothing.
Y'all about to do nothing. Y'all ready? It wasn't even just us. We knew the crew. I was like, oh my gosh, we're about to do so. It was I was enlightened. You know what I mean? Thank you for the gift.
Well, thank you all. The film is wonderful. Honk for Jesus, save your souls. Thank you so much to the writer, directors, and cast. Please check it out once it hits theaters.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it. Thank you.